The first time I noticed the change in the painting, I dismissed it as a trick of the light. The pastoral landscape hanging in my study had been a constant companion for years, a serene vista of rolling hills and a distant farmhouse beneath a tranquil sky. But that evening, as twilight crept through the windows, I could have sworn the clouds had shifted, darkening ominously. I approached the canvas, squinting in the fading light. Yes, there it was. A subtle alteration in the brushstrokes, as if the artist had returned in the night to add a touch of gloom to their creation. A chill ran down my spine, but I shook it off. Imagination, surely. The next morning, I woke to news of a freak storm that had devastated the countryside 50 miles north. Trees uprooted, power lines down, flash floods tearing through sleepy villages. As I sipped my coffee and scrolled through the headlines, my eyes drifted to the painting. My mug shattered on the hardwood floor. The once idyllic scene now depicted a landscape ravaged by wind and rain. The farmhouse roof had partially collapsed, and the placid stream had become a raging torrent. It was as if the canvas had captured the very disaster I'd just read about. Hands trembling, I approached the painting. The brushstrokes were unchanged, the frame undisturbed, yet the scene before me was undeniably different. I ran my fingers over the surface, half expecting to feel wet paint, but it was dry and textured, just as it had always been. In the days that followed, I became obsessed. I scoured the internet for information on the artist, a reclusive figure known only as E.M. Blackwood. The painting had been a gift from my late grandmother, who'd always had a penchant for the unusual. But beyond a few vague references to Blackwood's prophetic works, I found nothing. I began to spend hours staring at the canvas, watching for the slightest change. Sometimes I convinced myself I could see the clouds shifting, the trees swaying in an unseen wind. Other times the stillness mocked me, and I questioned my sanity. Then, one crisp autumn evening, I noticed a new detail emerging in the bottom right corner of the painting. A small figure, barely more than a silhouette, walking along the winding path towards the farmhouse. As the days passed, the figure grew clearer. A man in a dark coat, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. The sense of foreboding grew within me. I knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that something terrible was going to happen. But what? And to whom? I considered destroying the painting, but fear stayed my hand. What if breaking the canvas unleashed something worse? So I watched, and I waited, as the figure in the painting drew ever closer to the farmhouse. On the night the stranger finally reached the door, I sat vigil in my study, a tumbler of whiskey clutched in my shaking hand. As the clock struck midnight, a knock echoed through the house, not from the painting, but from my own front door. Heart pounding, I rose to answer it. On my doorstep stood a man in a dark coat, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. In his hand was a leather portfolio. "Good evening," he said, his voice like gravel. "I believe you have something that belongs to me. A painting by my late mother, Elizabeth Blackwood." As he stepped into the light, I saw his face clearly for the first time. It was my own, aged by decades and weathered by unimaginable horrors. He smiled, a grim twist of lips that never reached his eyes. "We have much to discuss," my elder self said, "about the future and how we might change it." Behind me, unnoticed, the painting began to shift once more.